So next, I'm going to welcome Melissa Akinlauen from Sick Cells and also Brenda Martin to further discuss clinical trials.
Deep breath and let's start. And first I want to say to Doris out there in the virtual world, I hope you're feeling better. I was so excited when I heard you was going to be here. This is one of my patients since she was a little girl and now she's all grown up and a mommy. I just want to say hello and I hope we get to catch up soon. So my part is understanding clinical trials. I think that before I even get into it, sitting out here thinking about clinical trials, I was recently precepting one of the student nurses, and I took her around to the inpatient side and the clinical side. And then when I took her down to the clinical research center, I have a tendency to move around, but okay, thank you. She was like, it was a lot of very busy and, oh, thank you. That would. It's very busy, it's very detailed, and then, you have to be very organized. And she came to me, she says, you a provider and you seem like you love your patients, but you really love research. Why? Because she didn't see it. And I said to her, I really believe research improves the quality of life for my patients. And I said to her, I was in a meeting recently, something like this, where we had a whole lot of stakeholders, nurses, doctors, social workers, community affairs. But what was different about this meeting is that we had representatives from insurance companies. And I said to him, question him. I said, I could order all the oxycodone in the world and you never give me a problem with it. But the one time I ask you for, acupuncture for pain management, or I ask you for massage or for even physical therapy, it's like, no. And prior auths, which is the bane of my existence, I have to go over and over for things that I think should be a part of pain management. And he replied to me very bluntly, and he said, I have all the clinical trials to tell me that oxycodone works for pain management. Show me where there's acupuncture or massage or whatever else you're at. You have to prove it to us. So that's where I wanted to start off first. But anyway, back to my slides. So the first clinical trial in the Bible, King, I'm not even going to try to say that, ordered his people to eat meat and drink wine. Daniel of Judah and his friends who were vegetarians refused the royal diet. They proposed the royal student, the first recorded with clinical trial protocol. Test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. This was the first open-label, unblinded trial. The NIH clinical trial definition, a research study in which one or more human subjects are prospectively assigned to one or more interventions, which may include placebo or other control, to evaluate the effects of those interventions on health-related biomedical or behavioral outcomes. And all that to say is that in the clinical trial, you have human subjects and they want to test that, as we've heard over and over again, the safety and efficacy to make sure that this medicine or whatever your intervention is working in the general population. Now, goals of clinical trial: discover better ways for prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. The primary goal is to understand treatment safety and effectiveness. The ultimate goal is what I believe is to improve the quality of life for my patients. What is a clinical trial? Medical researchers develop a protocol, and this is just to say that they have a plan for answering the research question or questions that they are investigating. The plan or protocol will include eligibility criteria. Is it hemoglobin SS? And as we've heard before, I hope in the future we could have clinical trials with hemoglobin SC and hemoglobin S beta thal plus. Your participants 5 to 12 years old. So it just tells you what is going to be included in the plan. The potential risks. Is this going to decrease my hemoglobin instead of increase my hemoglobin? And the benefits, is it going to decrease the amount of crisis I'm having? All this is a part of the plan. The length of the study, for 24 months, you're going to be in this study. Information about treatment and treatment processes. am I going to have an MRI? So it's what the intervention aims to do. How will side effects be managed? All this is a part of the protocol. Consenting to a clinical trial. The research team may approach participants because they fit the eligibility criteria that has been established. The team will give information about the study, the potential risks and side effects, as I said. Participants will be given the opportunity to ask questions, and I want to emphasize that, ask questions over and over again and get more information. Participants will sign an informed consent. As Dr. Campbell said, we give the consent form the day before or a week before, and I always ask them to give it to their families, whoever's their support system. I want them to know what we're asking this family to do, because I know that their support system, I may have to depend on them to bring that patient to the clinical site. Also, I say, ask your pediatrician. I'm peds, so I'm always going to talk from a pediatric perspective. But ask your doctor to go over it with you. I want you to feel safe. Whoever's your support system needs to be a part of this consent process. And it's not just at the time of consent. The consent form I use throughout the study. These are the things you say you're going to do. Do you have any questions? So I go over it again and again. This is one of the most important documents in a clinical trial, informing the participants of what they're agreeing to do. It is important to note that the participants can withdraw from the clinical trial at any time. This is something that, as they said, it could be 30 pages that they're going over, and they feel like, oh, this is like signing my mortgage, like they're signing their life away. So you have to emphasize to them that they are volunteers and they can withdraw at any time without any penalties. Nothing will happen if they decide that they want to stop. Now, safety. I don't know how many times I have heard this, I don't want to be a guinea pig. And this is something that we have to really emphasize, especially with sickle cell participants. So in clinical trials, they're closely monitored, ensuring that trials are conducted to follow all ethical, regulatory, and legal requirements. Some measures for the participant is the Institutional Review Board, or the IRB. And this is a committee in the hospital that looks over all this plan, this protocol, to make sure that it's safe. We have the informed consent. That informed consent does illustrate everything that you're going to do. The Ethics Review Committee and the Data Safety Monitoring Board that looks at all this data throughout the trial. So if they see something that's happening, like the hemoglobin is going down or the VOCs are going up, they are looking at all that data to say, okay, this trial, we have to look at again. Now, the benefits, access to new treatment. This is what we want, something new and different. I'm old school. I have been working with sickle cell patients for many years, and all I had was hydroxyurea for decades. And hydroxyurea, is not for everyone. You get closer medical attention. That's one of the things that the participants like, is that they could, have that personalized care. You're contributing to medical advancements to improve the quality of life, not only for you, but for everyone else. You're benefiting from treatments that may be safer, have fewer side effects, and work more effectively than currently available treatments. That is our goal. Risk, of course, the side effects that we'll learn that is in the consent form, but that is we will see as the trial goes on. More frequent visits to the hospital. You have to know that this is a commitment. Increased costs due to transportation, food, and childcare. Who's going to take care of your other children when you're coming to the hospital? Now, clinical trials in sickle cell disease. There are a number of clinical trials for sickle cell disease, but although there are a large number of patients who are eligible, recruitment difficulties and challenges are different because we have physical, we have psychological, and social aspects of trial participation. Barriers to trial participation must be analyzed and solved because this impedes the introduction and evaluation of new treatments for our sickle cell population. Now, barriers, this is something that we will have to look at. Our distrust of clinical trials due to the history of African Americans' treatment in sickle cell disease has started from the time of slavery, where we were, clinical subjects that we didn't give permission to, and to, of course, the famous one, the Tuskegee syphilis study. In our population, sometimes there's a lack of access to health care, no insurance. And in our present administration, this is something that we're going to have to deal with over and over again. provide us with a lack of sickle cell knowledge, or sometimes when my patients travel outside of clinical centers, you'd be surprised the amount of calls I get about fever management. They're giving me Tylenol, Miss Brenda. They're not giving me, any kind of antibiotics. And lack of knowledge of clinical trials for sickle cell disease. Of course, we have the acute and chronic pain events, and that is something that just happens. And so therefore, in clinical trials, we have this window that we have to get this test done in, and, it may take, and then all of a sudden they wake up and they have a pain. So you have to be flexible. And sometimes with inflexible research protocols, because of these windows, we do not get the testing done. So we need more flexibility in clinical trials, especially for sickle cell disease, because of the pain. Sometimes the pain, they physically can't get to the clinical site. How are you going to get them to the clinical site? There are also socioeconomic factors, and no, I can't solve all the socioeconomic factors that we're going to have to deal with even more and more in this present administration, because if they're thinking about, I don't have housing, I don't have food, the study is not going to be on the top of their list, and they cannot take time off work. However, we do have social workers that can, guide them to community resources. We have social workers that could tell them about different things that, programs that they may be eligible for. And taking time off work, that is a reality in some of our families, that they cannot afford to lose a day's pay. I know some sponsors are very, generous, and they will even provide transportation. I've had that before, where one of my patients, the car went out. They couldn't get there, but they provided a Uber transportation so that they could get to the clinical site. So you have to think about all these things when you have sickle cell patients participating in clinical trials. Is not that straightforward. So why participate in a clinical trial? Research is vital to the treatment of individuals living with sickle cell disease. As I said to you before, I had one drug. That's it. That's all I had. I had transfusion and I had hydroxyurea to treat my sickle cell patients for years, and that's it. And as we know, hydroxyurea is not for everybody. It doesn't work for everybody. So a poor understanding about the value of clinical trials leads to patients being reluctant to participate in research, because, as I said, they don't understand that, we have all these safety protocols embedded into a clinical trial for safety. And I have to be very frank, racism is very much so, and their personal feelings of how they interact in the hospital network, I'm trying to do it very diplomatically, is also something that we have to deal with. Recruiting and sustaining participation in a clinical trial is a challenge, but I think that when you understand some of the factors, you can keep your participants in the trial. Because, as I said, they're not only doing it for themselves, but they're doing it for the whole community. So I believe that through research, we develop new treatments that improve the quality of life for my patient, and that's what keeps me motivated. We have different websites that we can look for clinical trials, but some of them are not user-friendly. I have to be real. Have you ever tried going on some of these sites? They are very challenging, and I think I'm pretty much intelligent to go through it, but even me, I'm like, wow. So these are some of the things that for you out there, when you put up these sites, please make them more user-friendly.
Before we get to the video, first I want to thank Brenda, and we'll give her a round of applause for the information she's provided this afternoon. Thank you. And we are going to segue to a testimonial video from Doris Polanco.
My name is Doris Polanco, and I have sickle cell disease, SC. I worked with Sick Cells on an advisory basis in the past. I'm a New Yorker, but I currently live in Florida. And And I have been in a clinical trial before, which is, I think, why I actually thought it was a perfect fit. My doctor at the time told me about the trial and how they were looking for participants and how I had all the requirements in terms of hemoglobin levels and, a certain amount of hospitalization a year, like, all the requirements. I met them all. So then the next time I went in, they called me and told me a bit about the trial and how it would pan out. So I went in for the first appointment, and that's when, they explained it more, ran some tests, and then, I just signed the documents and went from there. It was very exciting for me at first because I think when people think of clinical trial, they're more, people sometimes think, oh, I'm not going to be, a lab rat. Like, I'm not going to be a guinea pig.
Yeah.
And I always say that it depends where you are in your journey with your chronic illness. So in that moment that I was asked, I was in a very critical, I was sick all the time. So I was like, if someone had told me, drink 2 shots and hop on one leg, I would have done it. That's how desperate I was.
Yeah.
So that just came in a perfect time. And I guess I was desperate enough, to give it a go. It was very thorough. I took my parents with me before I actually got the medication for the trial. I brought in actually my parents and then my brother went with me because I wanted to make sure that, sometimes us as patients, we can miss things or questions or just kind of sign things very abruptly without thinking things through. So to me, it was very important to have my support group there so I could, help me better understand. And we debated it at home, and I said yes. It was very exciting because I had a lot of hope in that. I mean, it was a placebo, so I didn't know straight off the back if I was going to have if I was going to be taking the actual medication. So that was a little bit nerve-wracking, but I remember I recorded myself actually every night that I took the medication. And I still have those videos of just, looking up to the sky and kind of like, asking God to just please let this be, life altering in a good way for me.
Yeah.
And I went through, at first it was every week. I had to get blood drawn and had to check me. And I think it was once a month I would go in and they would give me like the monthly supply.
Okay.
Which were very big. They were like in these little kind of paper book, like card paper booklets.
Okay.
And I did that for 2 years. So for 2 years I was on it.
Wow.
And I think at one point I didn't really see any difference. I didn't really see any, like my levels and certain things weren't really changing, and I was still getting hospitalized. So for me, that's when I started to kind of wonder, or I became suspicious because I said, well, I don't think I'm probably on the sugar pills or something.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until the end that I did turn out to be on the placebo. But I was just excited that even from the beginning, I told myself that even if this didn't help, even if it didn't help me, that my data was going to be used to help others battling this, same disease. So that for me was already a win,
Yeah. No,
Um,
absolutely.
but it was 2 years, and at times it did get a little. They gave me a cell phone, and then I think it was maybe 3 months, 6 months into it, I had to document every night how I was feeling. It was like, I think there were a handful of questions, maybe 5 or 10 questions every night.
Yeah.
to document like your mood, your pain level, things like that. So it was time consuming, but
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, I've always been an advocate for my community since I was 15, and I'm 38 now.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It's very, very important for more people to be more receptive to these clinical trials. Like I said, even if it doesn't help,
Right.
us, like you as a specific individual, your data will be used to help others. And I think that's the most powerful, thing that you can do for a community. Seeing all these different pharmaceutical companies coming up with, therapies or medications to help their lives and just help give more of a better quality of life to individuals fighting sickle cell disease. So that gives me hope every time I see a new pharmaceutical company come out, with a new therapy. That gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah.
And it gives me peace of mind for even myself as I get older.
Yeah.
We weren't supposed to really live this far, and yet here I am.
I want to thank Doris for sharing her testimonial, and hopefully if she's watching virtually, give her hello as well. So to bridge together what Brenda has shared with us today, as well as Doris's testimonial, we'll have just a few questions that will help us encourage those that are interested and want to learn more about clinical trials. And Brenda, as you alluded to in your presentation about some of the misconceptions and the stigmas, can you just talk a little bit more about what are the key strategies to battling and overcoming some of those misconceptions about clinical trials?
Education, education, education. You really have to, and when you're dealing with a provider you trust, it's always much more easier and helpful. But when you're saying the same thing over and over again, we have ways of making sure that it is safe. That when you enter a clinical trial, it's not like years ago. We do have these safety measures to ensure safety for our patients. And then the other thing is that what you get out of the trial, just like Doris said, sometimes you will get that placebo, quote unquote, sugar pill, but you get that extra care sometimes, that personalized care, because you're going to see a provider more frequently. The other thing that I think that you have to be your advocate. I'm going to tell this story because Dr. Campbell's still here. Anyway, I had a patient, a mother, who wanted her child to be in this study. And she was told no because she wasn't compliant with coming to clinic. So they red flag her. We have these research meetings. And so the social worker came to me and said, she really wants to be in this study, Miss Brenda. Can you just talk to her? So I went to her and I said, I'm going to be frank with you. How do I know that you're going to participate in this study when you do not come to clinic? And she says, well, when you explained about the research study, you said that I would be going to the research center. You said that it would be more flexibility in me getting a appointment that will help me. She says, the other thing is that I'm in school, and every time I go to clinic, and she said it just like this, I am always late for school, and I cannot be late for school anymore because after I have to wait to see the provider, then I have to wait for the lab. By the time I get to school, I'm late, and then I take my child home, I'm late. So if you could get me into the research center where you told me that I can do my clinical care and my research and have the lab all at once, I believe you, Ms. Brenda. I will come if you tell me that I can get to school by a certain time. So this is what I'm talking about, being flexible and listening to your patients and thinking outside the box. And that's what we did, and we got her, and she was compliant. She did come.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I want to hear your thoughts a little bit about the importance of a support system when it comes to consent. Both you and Doris did reiterate having family members and support members of your support team there, especially in the consent process. I know you've worked with pediatrics, but can you share a little bit about that perspective as well, that importance?
The reason why I always say this is a family affair is because with sickle cell, the unpredictable, you can't predict when you're going to have a crisis. And so therefore you need that support system, because if they need help during that trial process, it's somebody that you're going to develop a relationship with, not only your patient, but their family member, to say, can you bring the child to the clinic for me? Or that other person that, well, when she's thinking about, well, maybe I don't think I could do this anymore, that other person saying, yeah, but look, this is what they're saying that it's going to happen for you. So that's what you should do. The other part about it is that when, you know, you're going through this 30-page or how many pages of this clinical, this consent document, and it is a lot, and you forget things. So that's why I like that other person there, so that if they have a question, they could also ask that question and re-emphasize or reinforce what you've said. I like that the consent form, give it to the pediatrician or whoever is in that community to help them make this decision, because it's over years that they're going to be participating.
Definitely. Support systems, as we know, and we all can reiterate in this room, are crucial to the work that we all do. One of the final questions that we asked Doris in her video was, what gives you hope for the future? And as we wrap up this particular conversation, I want to hear, what gives you hope for the future in clinical trials?
As I said to you before, because I have walked this walk for a little while, decades, but anyway, to have more than one treatment for my sickle cell patients is so important, because everyone is different. And when you just have one, we're not a cookie cutter. You know, everything is different. What may work for one person will not work for another person. And finally, we're getting the resources, we're getting the funding to get different medicine, different treatment for sickle cell. I mean, it was years, as I said to you before. It was just hydroxyurea, and that was it. So now to find these different companies investing, yes, that is hope for me for the future for my patients.
Well, I can't think of a better conclusion to this conversation than the hope for the future. I hope as we get ready for the lunch hour that we continue to have these conversations about effective strategies, as well as sharing with one another what gives us hope for the future in clinical trials. So I want to thank you, Brenda, for your presentation, and thank you to Doris for her testimony.
Thank you, Doris.
Thank you guys so much for that really awesome conversation and presentation. I do just want to take a moment to really cement something that Brenda said right when she started, which is that that Doris was one of her patients. And so I'm sure it must feel really great to see someone who you've known for so long being in peds, now being able to take advantage of some of the clinical trials.